Welcome to Immigration Data 101, an introduction to databases and data sets. As the title suggests, this is very much an introductory session. I'm going to survey a little bit of some of the data that's available to you and try to give you a sense of how you might be able to use it in your work. And I want to do all of this without going into too much depth or detail into any one thing. The idea here is to get a good broad survey of things that gives us a starting point. The idea of an introduction is that it sets the foundation for doing future work. And that's what I'm trying to do today, because my hope is that we're going to be able to offer more further webinars of this nature on this topic, where hopefully we can dive a little bit deeper into some of this data, look at some of the ways it's going to be practical for you, and just really explore it in more depth. And in order to do that, I'm going to be collecting your feedback at various points. So please know that your feedback is really, really useful to me. It is more data that I'm going to be using in the work I do, and it's hopefully going to inform future webinars of this nature on data research and data sets. So my name is Jason Chalmers. I'm the research lead at ARAISA, otherwise known as the Atlantic Region Association of Immigrant Serving Agencies. If you don't know who we are, we're an umbrella organization that supports settlement service providers across all 4 Atlantic provinces. And my role here is really to do anything that's research related. So this means doing internal research at ARAISA. It means doing research in partnership with our members. It also means supporting academic researchers in their work. Any kind of research that's going to benefit the sector in our region, this is the kind of research I'm interested in. This is the kind of research that I'm here to support and get involved in. So that really is kind of a very brief introduction just to who I am and what I'm doing here. But I also want to tell you a little bit about where I am. So I'm joining you today from Jabuktuk, which is also known as Halifax. Jabuktuk means Great Harbor in the Mi'kmaq language. And for those of you in the area, you are aware that we're in the middle of a great big snowstorm here today. So Jabuktuk is part of a much larger territory called Mi'kmaqi, which is the ancestral and unceded territories of the Mi'kmaq. This is also part of the peace and friendship treaties. And I want to note that we are all treaty people. Doesn't matter where you've come from, how long you've been here, why you came here. You are part of the treaties anyway. You belong to these treaties, and we have certain responsibilities within these treaties. So I think many of you are probably also joining from Mi'kmaqi today. Some of you might also be joining from the traditional and unceded territories of the Beothuk, the Maliseet, and the Passamaquoddy, as well as the homelands of the Innu and Inuit of Labrador. And I want to recognize that some of you might know a great deal of the Indigenous histories of where you live. Some of you might know a little bit. Some might not know anything at all. Um, but we're all here to learn. The idea of this is a learning session. And my role and responsibility here is to share helpful resources with you. And so with that in mind, I actually want to share this resource with you, which I use quite regularly. And maybe you've heard of it as well. It's nativeland.ca. And this is an interactive map. Basically what you get, you come to it, you get an interactive geographical map of the world. You can navigate to anywhere in the world you want. It's most detailed when you're looking at North America, Turtle Islands, but you can look anywhere in the world. And what it shows you is Indigenous territories across the world. So as you can see in the top left corner here, you can filter based on territory, language, or treaty. And depending on what you filter for, it overlays this geographical map with a territorial or linguistic or treaty map showing you where you're living. So all you have to do is find out where you live, pick what kind of territory you want a sense of, click on it, and you'll see whose territory, whose land are you really living on. And it's a really great resource. If you don't know very much about the Indigenous histories of where you live, this is a great place to start. You can begin to know whose land and territory you're really living on. If you already know a lot, It's very interactive. You can click on it. It will give you more information about where you're living and the peoples of that land. And really, the reason I'm sharing this with you is because this really does matter to the work we do. I think most of us, our job and our passion is to help immigrants and refugees make their home in Canada, which means we're really helping people to build homes on Indigenous land. And if we want to do this well and responsibly, then we need to understand these histories ourselves, but we also need to help newcomers to understand these histories. And there really is a lot of learning for us to do. No matter how much or how little you know, there's an infinite amount of learning for all of us to continue doing, whether it's related to this, related to other things. And that's really why we're here, because there's an infinite amount of learning. And I hope you're here to do some learning with me. And I'm doing this by sharing resources with you, by looking at some data and then getting a sense of how this can inform the work we do. Data is really important to providing effective services to newcomers. It can help us to understand a lot of different things. It can help us to understand newcomer populations themselves. So demographic data can help us to understand who newcomers are and some sense of what their experiences are like. Data can help us also to understand the larger context in which settlement and integration occurs. So something like religion and diversity or indigenous land, these are not immigration themselves, but they inform immigration and they are informed by immigration. And so it gives a larger context to the settlement and integration work that we do. Data can also help us to understand trends in immigration. So these trends might look at immigration across time or at a single moment of time, which just gives us a better sense of what the trajectory of immigration looks like in Canada. And so keeping all of this in mind, demographic and other data can really support our work in a variety of different ways. First of all, it's really crucial to designing new services and programs. If you're designing a new service or a program, you need to understand the populations that you're serving, that you're working with. And demographic and other data can help to understand these populations so that we can best understand their interests, best respond to their needs, and provide the most effective services that we can. The same data is also useful if we're updating or expanding programs that already exist. So for example, if you have a program that's targeted to a specific population of newcomers and you want to apply the same type of program to a new population, well, you can better, if you understand the new population, you'll be able to adapt that program more effectively to that service or program, to that particular population. And then finally, data is really crucial to funding applications. The work we do needs to be informed by data and evidence. And funders want to know that our work is informed by data and evidence. So having two or three really central core impactful pieces of data in your funding application can have a lot more impact than not having any in there. And so my purpose today is to survey a few different databases with you today, just to give you a sense of how to get there, what they look like, and what you might start to do with them. So these are the Census of Population, the Longitudinal Immigration Database, or IMDb, Open Government, and the ARAISA Research Library. And I think many of you are probably familiar with some or all of these databases, and some of you might not be. So I'm hoping no matter where you're at, you can gain some kind of insight into the work you do and how you engage with these databases. So let's get into it then, shall we? Let's start with the Census of Population. So uh, probably this is maybe one of the most commonly used databases out there. So the Census of Population is a database that is operated by Statistics Canada. And what it is, it's a national survey of every single household in Canada. It's done every 5 years. So the most recent census year is 2021, but data is available for previous census years. And one of the great things about the census is that since it surveys every household in the country, that means it includes data for both immigrants and non-immigrants. And if you've been there, if you've explored this, you know that includes a lot of different data. It has data on income, education, family composition. Once you're there, you can see on the right-hand side, you can scroll forever. It just, the data keeps coming and coming and coming. But we're going to focus on the immigration data today. So let me just begin by showing you how to navigate there. So as I said, it's a Statistics Canada database. So we're going to start on Statistics Canada's homepage, so statcan.gc.ca. So this is what the homepage look like. And you'll see on the top toolbar there, click on Census, and then you'll get a drop-down menu, Census of Population. That's where we're going. Census data. So you're in the census portal here. And so there's actually a lot of stuff that you can explore from within here, but I usually go straight to the data because that's what I'm interested in. And so the data is on the left-hand side, census data. That'll bring us here. Click on census profile. And there we are. This is basically where we want to be. You can see we're not at the data yet, but this is basically where we're going to begin to focus in on the data. So you can see we can find data for all of Canada. If we click on Canada, we're going to have data for the entire country, but we can also access data for each specific province. So for the sake of example today, I'm going to pick Prince Edward Island. So let's see what things look like in Prince Edward Island. Click on that. You see, I'm still not into data yet because we can actually narrow our search even more. So I can click on Prince Edward Islands and I can see the data for the entire province, but I can also narrow it down to census metropolitan areas, population centers, health regions, electoral districts. There's a variety of different ways that I can narrow this down for region, which is really useful to service providers. If you're serving just a particular province, you can look at data just for that province. If you're serving only a specific region, so if you're only serving Charlottetown, you can just find the data just for Charlottetown. But again, for the sake of example, let's look at data for the entire province of PEI. And so here, this is where we really want to be. This is where the data is. And if you follow along and you end up here with me, you'll see that on the right-hand side, you can pretty much scroll forever. There's a lot of stuff there. So the left-hand column is characteristics. So this is the particular thing we're looking at. Then to the right is the total population count, or the total number of people meeting that characteristic. And then further right is the rate. So these are the percentages. So the population broken down to percentages. And as I said, really, we only have time to focus on immigration related data today, and this isn't all immigration related. So what I usually do when I get here is I use my handy dandy web browser search feature. So this is Control F. If you are on a PC, I believe it's Command F if you are on a Mac. And this just allows you to search within your browser window. And so what I usually do, I use my Control F and I type in IMMIGR. The reason I don't put the entire word is because if I just put in IMMIGR, then I get immigrant, immigrate, immigration, immigrants. All of those possibilities pop up. I think a librarian would tell you to put a little asterisk at the end of it, but in the web browser works just as fine if you do it this way. Any partial part of immigrant or immigration will pop up for you. And so when I do that, it brings me about halfway down the census to where all the specifically immigrant related data is. And you can see that at the top here, we can see data is already being broken down for non-immigrants and immigrants and non-permanent residents. For immigrants, it's broken down on the period in which they immigrated to Canada. Below this, we can see the age when people immigrated to Canada. And you can keep scrolling down to see other data. So if you keep scrolling down, One of the things you'll see is you can see places of birth for recent immigrants. So there's quite a bit of data there. So if you keep scrolling down, once you get there, you can scroll down. The amount of immigration data there is actually quite manageable. So what you can find specifically, you can find the period during which people immigrated to Canada, the age at which people immigrated. You can find the place of birth, which is broken down both for all immigrants as well as just for recent immigrants. And so that would be within the past previous 5 years. You can look at people divided for admission category or applicant type. You can see broken down for pre-admission experience, and then you can also see generation. So this would be a first generation is an immigrant, second generation is the child of immigrants, third generation, so on. But there's also a lot of other data that might be useful to the work we do. Usually, I think most of it's right below the immigrant data. There's data on how people identify as visible minorities and how people identify with ethnic and cultural origins. There's data on religion and also on people's language, which is disaggregated both for official languages as well as people's mother tongues. So again, this isn't immigration, but it informs immigration and it's informed by immigration, and it can therefore help our work in settlement and integration. So there are some definite advantages to using census data, as you can probably imagine by now. First of all, since it's a national household survey, you're basically working with population data, which means 100% of the population. This isn't a sample. You're working with everybody, and that means it's reliable. Some of the data, including quite a bit of the immigrant data, is a sample. It's a 25% sample of the population, but nevertheless, that still means it's relatively reliable, um, and you can pretty much trust that it's more or less accurate if you're using that data. Another huge advantage is the fact that you can zone in on a particular region, whether it's province or CMA or health region. This is great because I think a lot of us serve a particular region. We just serve Nova Scotia or we just serve Moncton. Um, and if that's the case, you can zone in on just the area that you're serving in order to get a good picture of what things are like there. All of this also means that there's a really strong comparative component to working with census data. So you could compare provinces with Canada, you could compare provinces against one another, you could compare specific regions against their province, a lot of possibilities there. Since we have data from previous years, you can also compare the current census data with previous years to see how things have changed. And to some extent, we can also compare immigrant and non-immigrant data, although that is somewhat limited. Of course, there are limitations to working with the census. Probably the biggest one is that the census is only done every 5 years, which means that at some point, the data is going to be 5 years out of date. Right now, it's almost 4 years out of date. So it's not a true reflection of what our region looks like right now, especially considering the amount of immigration that's happened in the past like 4 years. Um, what you're looking at is not the best portrait of what our region looks like right now, but we'll be doing another census next year, and then we'll have really fresh, really up-to-date data, and we'll be able to work with that. Another challenge of this is that not all the data is disaggregated for immigrants. Basically, what I showed you is what's been disaggregated for immigrants, which is really useful, but some of it isn't. Some of it you have to make other requests or go dig deeper into other bases. So you can't just find all of that here. Uh, Nevertheless, there's still a lot of good stuff. As I noted, I'm looking to get your feedback. Um, my idea here today is that maybe we'll do another webinar and we'll really dig really deeply into the census to see what other possibilities are here, what data is really here, what can we do with data, what are the possibilities. And so I want your feedback in order to kind of guide what that future work might look like. So if I was to do a census, a webinar on the census in the future, what would you find most useful? Would you like to see a webinar on immigrant demographics, on data related to context, so like religion, language? Do you want to look at regional comparisons or historical trends? So I'm just going to give you a minute or so to respond. What would be of most interest to you? It looks like the numbers are not shifting quite so much. Last call to get in your vote. Okay. All right. So immigrant demographics. Yeah. Okay. Um, well, I think that's also something we could do a future webinar, but we could also put out some resources for you on that particular interest there. So thank you so much for that. All right. So let's dig into our next database. So our next database is the Longitudinal Immigration Database, also called the IMDb. Not to be confused with the other IMDb that you find on the internet. This one has absolutely nothing to do with cinema. And like the census, this is a database that's operated by Statistics Canada. And what it does is combine data from IRCC with data from the Canada Revenue Agency. And it includes data for every immigrant who's filed taxes in a given year. So basically, IRCC, they have certain data, CRAs holding certain data. When they put it together for everybody who's filed taxes, it's put into this database. So there's a few ways you can engage with this, but we're going to look at the interactive visualization applications. And there's two main applications there. So there's one on economic outcomes and another one on mobility. So let me just show you how to find your way there. So again, Statistics Canada. So you're going to start on the home page, statscan.gc.ca. And I'll note that up in the top right corner, there is a search feature. If you type in Immigration Database Interactive Application, you'll probably find what you're looking for. But you can also navigate your way there. I usually navigate my way. And so we can see, so start with subjects up in the top toolbar. Subjects, click on that. And that'll navigate you to all the subject headings that are in that Statistics Canada has statistics on. So we're particularly interested in immigration and ethnocultural diversity, but there are a lot of other really useful portals in here. Population and demography, I spend quite a bit of time in there. The health portal also has some useful data in there. I think education, training, and learning, there's useful data in there. So there is immigrant and immigration related data in other portals, but most of it's concentrated in the immigration and ethnocultural diversity portal. So that might be something we could touch on a little bit later as well. So let's click on that and that'll take us here. So this is the immigrant and ethnocultural diversity portal. And you can see there's a lot of things here, a lot of ways you can navigate it. You can kind of direct yourself immediately to certain data sets on ethnicity, religion, visible minorities, and so on. You can search for indicators, but if you scroll down, you'll see the IMDb down there. So you scroll down and you click on that, and that brings us here. So this is the economic outcomes application. And what this explores, it essentially looks at average income for immigrant tax filers. So how much are immigrants earning? And you can look at different kinds of income. And as you can see here, there's quite a few filters you can select. Depending on what filter you choose, the graph is going to populate differently. And I'll note that I find this one, there's a bit of a learning curve, I find, to the IMDb. When you first get in there, you get in and it's maybe not totally clear what exactly you're doing. So you got to kind of play around with it a bit. But once you've played around with it, you start to see what its applications are and what its uses and value are. So if you aren't familiar with the IMDb and you're just getting into it, I would encourage you just to go there and just mess around with it and just play around and like see what kind of things are possible. And then you can start asking more specific questions. If you come in there with a specific question, sometimes it might not, you might not lead there you don't, it can help you understand which questions you want to ask if you've just played around. Playing is how we learn, right? So let me just give a brief example of how I might navigate this. So for example, let's say I want to compare family-sponsored immigrants and economic immigrants in New Brunswick. And I want to see how their average income differs. So I'm comparing these two groups for New Brunswick. So I click on New Brunswick because that's the region I want to look at. I want to compare the two populations. So I click on family-sponsored immigrants and economic immigrants. There's a variety of types of income at the bottom that I can search for. Let's say median employment income. So average employment income. How much are people earning at work, basically? So I'll click on that for that particular kind of income. And then here's a bit of the tricky part is it's based on admission year. So you're not just looking at everybody for all time. You're looking at people you're looking at a particular cohort of immigrants. So I'm going to pick 2016 because I know the data goes up to 2021 here. So I know if I pick 2016 cohorts, I'll have 5 years of data available to me. So basically what I'm looking at, I'm comparing average income for family-sponsored immigrants and economic immigrants who were admitted to New Brunswick in 2016. And then that's populated in the graph. And just to note, corresponding to the admission year, you see the years since admission. So 1 year since admission would be 2017, 2 years since admission, 2018, and so on. And you can see here the virtual tool, the tool, the thing you're looking at, really makes it easy to kind of identify trends rather than just looking at a data set. That's really one of the reasons I like this so much. I can tell you that both of them income increases over time. I can also tell you that economic immigrants are earning on average more than family-sponsored immigrants. And if you hover over a particular point, it's not just a trend, you can see the specific average number there. So I can see that economic immigrants are earning about, on average, 15,000 more than family-sponsored immigrants for this cohort. And another advantage to the visual tool here is that it's really useful if you're putting together some kind of presentation. If you have to throw together a PowerPoint presentation and you want to demonstrate your data, then all you need to do is use your print screen feature. And you can pop it in there. You just add your source citation there, and it looks pretty snazzy in a PowerPoint presentation. So great tool. Let's move on to the next one. So this is the mobility application. So basically, if you're interested in retention, this is where you want to be. Because basically, we're looking at retention. It's telling you, I'll do an example in a second, but basically what this is telling you is where immigrants are X years after arrival. And not just how many are still in the province, but how many have left and where specifically have they gone to. So let me just give you an example here. So let's look at retention for refugees who were admitted to Nova Scotia in 2018. So I'm interested in refugees, so I click refugee. I'm interested in Nova Scotia, so I click that. Again, I have to pick a specific cohort. So the 2018 admission year is the one I want to pick. And then I have to look at X number of years since admission. So, for example, I'm interested in 3 years after admission. So, where were refugees admitted to Nova Scotia in 2018, 3 years after they were admitted here? And what you get is this nice little map here. So the quality of the blue determines basically how many people are there. You can see dark blue means that you have quite a few people there, and lighter blue means that you have fewer. But if you look at the left-hand column here, about halfway down the screen, it says retention rate percent. That's 74%. So that's basically 74%. That's our retention rate. That's how many people are still in Nova Scotia. So looking at this, I can tell you that with I can reliably tell you that for refugees admitted to Nova Scotia in 2018, 74% of them were still living in Nova Scotia 3 years later. And what's great is that I don't just know who's still in Nova Scotia and who's left, but I can see where people have left too. So if I hover over Ontario, for example, that'll tell me that 14% of them have moved there. So 74% are still in Nova Scotia, 14% have gone to Ontario, and the other percent have gone to elsewhere. So really useful application. So for the economic outcomes application, again, what we're looking at is average income for immigrant tax filers, and you can filter it based on a variety of different things. So province, admission category, admission year, gender, official language, pre-admission experience, type of income. I just used a very simple example using a few filters just to give you a sense of it. But once you get in here and you can really explore and play around, you can get some really good possibilities. So you can compare gender. You can compare for what kind of pre-admission experience people have and how much they're earning. The mobility app, again, we're looking at retention and interprovincial migration for immigrant tax filers. Basically, we're using the same filters more or less to identify where people have gone. So the advantages of this, like the census, we're looking at all immigrant tax filers, which means we're working with a population data. This is not sample data, it's a population, it's everybody, which means that it's comprehensive data, it's accurate, it's reliable. When we're looking at that data, we know we can basically trust it, what's there. I also love the visualization tool. It's really great. It makes it so easy to identify trends. It also is really great to use that print screen feature and use it for presentations as long as you quote where it's from. But some disadvantages to using this tool as well. Like the census, it can be a bit out of date. Since it's tax data, it's always going to be at least a year out of date. And in general, this database is usually 2 to 3 years out of date at any given moment. So it's a bit more up to date than the census, but still you're looking at somewhat older data because it does take a while to get the data in there too. Another disadvantage is that it might not be the most simple thing to navigate when you first try out with it. Uh, but I think once you get past that initial curve, it actually becomes really easy to navigate and use and can be really useful for really identifying what matters and what's important to the questions you're asking. All right. So before I launch this poll, I also want to note that ARAISA did co-host a really in-depth webinar on the IMDb. So if you're really interested in doing a deep dive into this database, there is one which I believe is on the learning section with webinars, learning, then webinars on our website. And I think it's a good hour and a half, 2 hours, really going into what the possibilities are with this database. So if you like this, I recommend checking that out. But also, I could do a future webinar on this topic. And what would you like to see that on? What would help you engage with the IMDb? A tutorial on the Economic Outcomes app, a tutorial on the Mobility app. Would you like to do a walkthrough with examples? Or would you like some sense of how to interpret the IMDb data? So Melanie, could you launch that poll for us, please? Thank you. All right, it looks like I'm guessing that's the responses which have rolled in for us. So what it's looking like, most of you don't want to walk through with examples. Well, I can tell you that this is actually partly what's done with in the one that's been done that we have on our website already. It kind of does a bit of a walkthrough, but that's also something we could do just with your questions. What do you want to do? And like, let's just walk through it. How to interpret IMDb data. I mean, interpretation is like my favorite thing. That's the best thing about data is trying to figure out what it means. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for your feedback on that. All right. So our next database, Open Government. So this database is operated by the federal government. And what it does is provide you with access to a variety of different government data from a variety of different government organizations. So IRCC is obviously the one we're most interested in and we're going to go to most. And I have it bookmarked and I'm there all the time. But you also have data from Immigrant and Refugee Board, Atlantic Canada's Opportunity Agency, Employment and Social Development Canada. There's data there for provincial governments. So depending on what you're doing and what kind of questions you're asking, you might want to go into IRCC, but you might want to also check out some of the other government organizations' data as well. And basically what you get there, if you haven't been there before, what you get is not an application in your browser. You download an Excel document and you get the data for your hard drive, which makes it really fun to play with. So let me show you how to get there for those that haven't been there. So it's operated by the Canadian government. So you want to go to Canada's homepage, canada.ca. And this is what the homepage looks like. Homepage of our country. Scroll down to the bottom there. You'll see Open Government and Data. Click on that. And then search for open data and information. If you click on that, it'll bring you here. So this is basically the main portal. You see that there's a search feature. If you're searching for something in particular, yes, you can search for that. But you can also filter for the organization that you're interested in. That's usually what I do. So I click on organization and I get this big drop down and I scroll until I get to Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. You can see it's telling me there's 57 data sets in there. So I select that and it'll populate the 57 data sets that I have available to me. And there's quite a few here. Again, don't have quite the time to go through all of these, but I'll show you which one I find most useful, which I reliably go to. If I scroll down a bit, permanent residence, monthly updates. This is the one where I spend most of my time. If you're a service provider and you work with this data, you probably go here too. I'll also note that when the government updates these data sets, the order gets all changed. So sometimes you're like, oh no, where did the permanent residence go? It's gone. You just have to kind of scroll around and search for it. You'll find it. It's there. So if you are interested in this, like I'm interested in this, you can click on it. It's not just one data set. You get a bunch of different data. It's one data set, but you get it disaggregated in a variety of different ways. So you can see It's disaggregated for permanent residents by province and immigration category, PRs by country of citizenship, PRs by citizenship and immigration category, PRs by province and CMA. So it's been disaggregated and reaggregated in a variety of different ways. So once you know what you're looking for, I'm interested in permanent residents. I go here and then I kind of scroll through to see which data set, which aggregation is going to be the most useful to me. So I'm going to click on the first one here, permanent residence by province and territory and immigration category. And we will download as an Excel file, which looks something like this. So this is what I get. And so I've put this is on my hard drive now. I have it. I can do what I want with it. As you can see, it is massive. There's a lot of different numbers and data here. There's a lot of detail here. And so my big recommendation here is to spend 20 or 30 minutes formatting it once you have it so that it looks like what you want it to be, because it makes it so much easier to use when you've just spent that time formatting it. Spending half an hour formatting it saves you so much time in the long run. Something I want to note about reading it is that you tend to read the data upwards. So you can see here on line 35, for example, it said Newfoundland and Labrador total. Well, the breakdown of that data goes above Newfoundland and Labrador. So it's kind of like a cumulative. You have all the breakdown and then Newfoundland and Labrador total at the bottom. And I just wanted to point this out because this isn't the most intuitive way of reading for me. So if you're in there and you're playing with this data for the first time, you're generally, oh, I'm interested in Newfoundland and Labrador. Okay, well, I find that and I'm reading the data upwards from there. So as I said, it's worth spending 20 minutes playing around with this to make it more manageable to work with. Because I mean, it's not just that it's sometimes hard to read when you have a database this big, but it's just some of the data sets are so massive that it just gets really, really slow. So usually what I do is I just delete anything I don't want and then I kind of format what I do want. So let me give you an example of how I do that. Um, So this is asylum claimants by top countries of citizenship broken down for province and year. So you can see I have the countries of citizenship for asylum claimants, which I'm reading upwards, right? So Mexico, I'm reading upwards from that. And then I have every province and territory in which a claim has been made. And then I'm reading that for the years. Well, there's a lot of data. There's a lot of stuff I don't necessarily need. Let's say I'm interested in just the Atlantic provinces for the most recent years. I don't need anything else. I just want to know the most recent provinces or the most recent years in Atlantic Canada. So I delete all of the rest of time. I delete all the other provinces, add a little nice color and formatting, and it cleans up nicely like this. This is so much easier to read because as you can see here, it's broken down for month, quarter, and year. Here, I've deleted the months. I've deleted all years I'm not interested in. I just have the quarters and the yearly totals, just have the provinces I'm interested in, add a little color so it's easier to read. And it's not just easier to manage, it's not just faster on your computer, but it's so much easier to identify trends this way as well. So, I mean, just looking at this, for example, I can see that Mexico is the top country for asylum claims in 2023. And I can see that more than 23,000 people with Mexican citizenship made an asylum claim in 2023. But I can also see that only about 25 of them did so in Atlantic Canada. So people are tending not to make asylum claims in the Atlantic provinces. So just by cleaning up the data, that's already something I'm very easily able to read from this data set here. So as I noted, there is quite a bit of data available here. So There's data available that's broken down for basically immigration status. So there's data on permanent residents, which is what we were just looking at, refugees and asylum claimants, which is also what we were just looking at. Um, and specific refugee programs actually have their own data sets. So Syrian and Afghan refugee programs, you can find data sets specifically for them. There's data for temporary residents. There's data for temporary to permanent residents. There's other data sets out there that are available. These are kind of the core ones that you might be interested in. And it's broken down in a variety of different ways. So it's been disaggregated according to these, amongst others. So disaggregated for province, some cases census metropolitan area. Certain ones are broken down for age, gender, family status, language, which in some cases is for official language, some cases for mother tongue, uh, country of citizenship. So these are some of the ways that the data has been disaggregated. So also some of it's been disaggregated for education, skill level, immigration category, occupation, destination, um, and one that's really interesting, settlement provider and service type. This is a really cool one, but it's only for very select refugee data sets. You can't just find it for all immigrants, only for specific refugees. But that data, I think, might be of particular interest to service providers. So a lot of advantages to working with this. First of all, unlike Census, unlike IMDb, the data is really, really up to date, usually within a couple of months. So I was looking at some of the data just last week, and it was updated right through to the end of November. So basically, it just wasn't, it just didn't have December for last year. So we almost have all the data for 2024. So very relevant data. It's also great that you have access to so many different government data sets because IRCC, of course, has what we're most interested in. The IRB may have a lot of what we're interested in, but there's also a lot of stuff out there that can inform the work we do. And so that data is also available there too. Another big advantage, I think, is that you get to download the Excel files, which means I can keep it, I can have a record of it, but also I can fuss around with it. And play with it in a way that makes sense to how my brain works. I can organize it in a way that my brain will understand. There are some disadvantages though. So I mean, I think one of the bigger ones is that like the data that's here, the way it's been disaggregated has been curated by IRCC. So you can't necessarily find every combination of thing that you're looking for. So for example, if I want to see citizenship, country of citizenship for PRs broken down by province, I might not necessarily be able to find that. It is disaggregated in a lot of ways, which is very useful, but not every possible way. And I think that's probably just a constraint. I mean, that's a lot of time put into preparing these spreadsheets, putting them together, keeping them updated. So obviously, I mean, that's just a resource that obviously they can't commit to it. They've provided the ones that are most useful to us. So we work with what we got. You can make additional requests if you want specific data, I believe. Another disadvantage is that sometimes you get left with a massive set of data that is hard to scroll through and hard to interpret, which means that you also have to spend some time formatting it in Excel. Some of the data is really easy to read, some of it is just massive, and you do need to spend the time, but it's ultimately quite worth it. So our next poll, if we were to, if I was to have another webinar, what would help you engage with open government if that was the subject of it? So would you want to explore data from different organizations? Do you want to do a deep dive into IRCC data, what's available from there? Do you want me to go over how to format the data? Or would you like to see how to interpret data? So Melanie, can you launch that, please? Okay, I think we've just about reached. All right, last call for votes here. Last call. Okay, I think we can end the poll there and share it. So deep dive into IRCC data. Yeah, I think that is definitely something that's doable in the future. Also interested in other things. Okay, thank you for that. That's really helpful. Um, and because the IRCC data here is really good. There's a lot of stuff, and so it would be worth spending an hour on this for sure. Okay, on to our final database, the ARAISA Research Library, which is a database hosted by ARAISA. Yes, we've done it. It's a little bit different than some of the other databases that I've shown you because it's not data sets. It's not just the data that you're working with. What we've included here are research, reports, publications from the government, from academic researchers, from think tanks, whatever we could find, really. And we've included it in this database here. And what we've done for you is we've categorized all of this research by theme. So if you're just interested in retention and you just want to find the research that has to do with retention, then you can just click on the retention category and find everything that's there. And I think the best way to give you a sense of what's in there is to tell you what criteria we've used for inclusion. So everything that is in our research library fits three criteria. So first of all, it should be open access. So I know we can't, we're nonprofits, most of us, we can't afford access to these really expensive university databases where we can access all the articles. So everything in there is open access. You don't have to pay for anything. You're not going to hit a paywall. You're not going to have to enter your information or subscribe to anything. Basically, you should be able to click on a link and immediately, without any barriers, be able to access that research for free. Second of all, everything there addresses some kind of contemporary issue in immigration. So, for example, there's a lot of great research on immigration in Atlantic Canada in the 19th century that doesn't have so much bearing on what we're doing now. So there should be some kind of practical, immediate relevance to it um, in the world we're living in now. And third, there needs to be some kind of focus on Atlantic Canada. Whether this is a case study of a particular city or looking at data for a region or comparing to Atlantic provinces, there should be some kind of focus or emphasis on Atlantic Canada. So let me just show you how to find it. And you're going to want to find it from our brand new website, araisa.ca. If you haven't been there in a while or you've never been there, you'll see that we have a brand new, very fancy website. It's gotten a bit of a facelift. And so hopefully it's a lot easier for you to navigate. It also means there are some kinks still within it, but we're working to get those out. It's just still so new. So this is what it looks like. And you'll see at our toolbar on the top there, there's resources. So if you click on resources, that'll bring you here. Just scroll down a little bit. And then you can see there's a library. So we have a variety of different research and other resources here. The library is where the library is. So if you click on library, it'll bring you here. And this is what our library looks like. So there's two really main ways to navigate the library. So first of all is the search bar. This works like any other search feature, whether it's Google or a library database or whatever. You can go in there, type in the keyword or the author or the source that you want. You'll find everything that corresponds to that. It is Boolean enabled, which means that you are able to use two keywords and find everything that has both those keywords in it. But sometimes you just want everything on a particular topic. And so you see we've organized things by category. And so if you click on one of these categories, it'll take you to all the relevant publications, all the relevant research that we have in there on that topic. So for example, let's say we're developing a new program for LGBTQ plus youth. And okay, well, I can click on gender and sexuality, and there's also a category for youth. Let's click on gender and sexuality and see what's there. So I click on that category and it brings me here. And you can see when I did this screenshot, there was about 7 articles that we had in there. I just did a big update to the library, so there's probably quite a bit more in there now. So if you're in there, there should be more than what you see here. And so basically you can read through all the titles and maybe, oh, like I look down, the gendered impacts of resettlement programs on Syrian male immigrants in Halifax. That sounds interesting. I'm going to click on that. So you can click on the title and that'll bring you to the metadata about the article itself. So we've got the title, we got the year of publication, we have the author, we have where the research was done, we have keywords. At the bottom, you see we have an abstract. So almost everything here has an abstract or some kind of brief description of what the research is. This way, when you go there, you can just spend a minute reading that to see if it's going to be useful. If you think it's useful, then you can click on the link there, the DOI, and that will take you directly there. So we don't host any of the research. It's all hosted externally, and we're just directing you to where it is. But we're also giving you everything you need to know, whether you need to go there or not. So let's say, oh, this is really interesting. I'll click on it, and you can read the entire research there. So there is a lot of research in here. Let me just show you another example what's in there. So as I said, there's research from all over, which includes research that we have done and we are doing at ARAISA. And this is one of those things. So this is something we've been doing recently, the Atlantic Immigration Spotlight on Data. This is something we started this year, and we're aiming to do it on a quarterly basis. And basically what we do here is present some kind of immigrant or immigration or settlement or integration related data. We tell you what that is. We provide a very brief interpretation of that data. And then we tell you in very concrete and practical terms what that data means for settlement and integration. And we try to do all of that within 2 or 3 pages so that you can read it, you can spend 10 minutes reading it and be able to use it without having to filter through a bunch of other stuff. So this is the kind of thing, if you go into the library and you type in ARAISA, this is one of the things that'll pop up. And something that's worth noting about this is that most of the data that I'm using here is coming right out of those databases that I just showed you. My data here is unique in a way because I've combined data to create distinctly Atlantic data. So the data you're finding in here is Atlantic, it's unique. You're not going to find these specific numbers anywhere else. But if you're just looking for a similar data on New Brunswick or PEI or Newfoundland or New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, PEI. Okay, that's all of them. If you're just looking for data on them, you can find comparable data very easy on your own for this. And some of the practical applications will still be relevant. Here's a couple other ones we've done. So we did one on the gender wage gap. We did one on retention. That was our most recent one that just came out on retention. And it compares retention for economic immigrants and refugees. And something I also want to note about the database, I'm doing my best to make everything up to date, and people are sending me things. But if there's something you think should be in there and it's not in there, you can't find it, please send it to me because this is the best way to keep it up to date. If researchers are sending me their open access research and people are sharing research they found, that's the best way to make sure that this library is really up to date and responsive to our needs. So let me just show you how to find the Atlantic Immigration Spotlight on Data in case you wanted to go there and check it out on your own. So again, same place. From our website, click on the resources, and you'll see the library. Right next to the library is Atlantic Immigration Spotlight on Data. If you click on that, that is going to take you to all of our publications of that nature. And the Spotlight is designed specifically for you, for service providers, so that it's short, it's practical, it's easy to read, it's relevant for the region. So that's our goal in producing that. And that's our goal in all of the work we do, is provide research that is accessible, practical, and useful for you. So that is what I wanted to say today, but I'm going to open it up for questions. You can post questions in the chat. You can also raise your hands. If you raise your hand, you can unmute yourself, ask the question on your own. If there's something you really wanted to get in touch with me about as well, you can just shoot me an email. That's fine too, and we can talk about it. So I'm going to stop sharing, and maybe we can remove my spotlight, or maybe add spotlights as they appear. So I'm just going to open it up for questions. I don't see any hands raised. Are there any questions in the chat, Victoria? Did you see any there?
No, not as of right now.
Okay. Well, let's oh, Simone has a question. Okay, Simone.
Yeah, hi, sorry. Just wanted to flag that there was a question received via private chat that we weren't able to answer, which was earlier when you were sharing the last data set. I think it was the Open Data portal. We didn't have the direct link. And so we can either follow up on that later or if you want, if you could like maybe show that again. Not sure, depending on how many other questions you get, perhaps, but just wanted to flag that.
Well, I don't see any other questions at the moment. So that was the open government you wanted to see there?
It was the last one, yeah, I think it was open government.
Okay, yes.
There was a lot of navigating to actually get to the screen that you were then doing the demo on.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Let me just share my screen again here. I don't think I did that right. Also, I actually, while I'm doing that, I wanted to note that if you're navigating the ARAISA Research Library from the French side of the website, it's not, that's one of the kinks that we still have to work out, is it's not totally working from the French side. If you navigate it from the English side though, you'll be able to get there. And if you're navigating from the English side, you will be able to find resources in both French and English. So whatever you search for, you should find results in either language you search for. It's just that the French interface is not working at the moment. Okay, here's where we are. Can you see that?
Yes. Jason, it's Melanie. I think it was when you shared the Excel that you downloaded. It was like how to get there.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So let me just, so we're at Government of Canada, scroll down, open government and data, open government. And also Melanie will be sharing the slides, I believe, so you can also follow along there. So what I did, I went to organization. I filtered by organization and I selected IRCC. So I click on that and that got me to all of the IRCC records. So all of the data sets owned by IRCC. And then basically you just kind of got to scroll down. You can maybe search by permanent residence. Or if you can just scroll down. So what I did, I just scrolled down until I found this one. That's the title, Permanent Residence Monthly IRCC Updates. So there's only 57 to scroll through. And depending on how recently it was updated, you'll probably see it towards the top. So I clicked on that. And that brings me here. And these are the Excel files that you can download from there. Does that help? Was that clear there?
Yes, yes. I see Fairness is saying that they were able to access it.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions, but lots of encouraging and grateful comments.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for the encouragement. I'm glad this is helpful. I really hope we are able to do some more of these in the future, really focusing in. Um, because I think there's really so much data out there that like, this is just an idea. This is dipping our toes into the water to see what's out there, to see what we can start to use for the work we do to inform it using evidence and data. And, but there's so much that it's really hard to do it all in one. I mean, if you go look at the IMDb workshop on our website, it's like 2 hours and it's just cracking the surface just of that one database. So I mean, if we were to do a deep dive on open government data, what IRCC has there, you know, we could easily spend an hour and a half, 2 hours working with that. So there's really a lot there.
There was a comment from Carol that said it would be great to have a hands-on workshop to go through these together more slowly. So something
That's
like
great.
that.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I think that's actually kind of what the other one is with the IMDb. It's kind of just like, what question do you have? Let's walk through it. And we could do something like that with like open governments or the census, for example. So I'm just going to wait a minute. We'll just continue to talk for another minute, just to see if there are any questions. Otherwise, you know, I really appreciate everybody showing up. You will be able to access this recording on our website. It'll be under the learning section of our website in case you want to follow along. And again, please note that we're also going to send out a survey afterwards to you, which should be coming along in about 15 minutes. Please fill that out. That'll also guide the work we do. Oh, we have a question here. Can any of these be converted into infographics? Yeah, and I think, you know, infographics are tricky because you need somebody to get the data, but then you also need somebody to present it in a way that's really useful. And I mean, Melanie, I don't know if you want to speak to that, because if I was to do this, I wouldn't do it myself. I would find the data, I would give some idea of what it might look like. And then I would take it to our communications team, Melanie and Yasmin, and probably ask them to convert it into an infographic.
Oops. Okay, I'm on. Yes, no, I would just second what you said. I think I agree. Like a lot of data can be used for infographics, but then it's just a matter of making them look visible, like not visible, I mean legible, that they are kind of understood and clearly laid out in an infographics. But yeah, I think it's a lot of data visualization with infographics. Yeah.
And thank you. I think on my side, part of that is also trying to like not overload on data. It's finding like just the right thing of data, just the right one or two or whatever things to compare. Because otherwise, yeah, because that way you can make something nice and concise and clean looking for an infographic. So yeah, a big part of that is finding that one really powerful piece of data in there. Okay, I have a question. How to get data on subcategories of refugees? It seems refugees are shown as a group. Okay, yeah, that's because what I showed was looking at the monthly monthly updates for permanent residents. So that's because I went to the data sets for permanent residents. But if you go into, so when you saw all the 57 entries there, the records for IRCC, there are separate data sets for refugees. So actually, since we have a little bit of time, I can probably show you what that looks like. Let me just navigate my way there, if that's helpful. Because you'll see there's separate data sets. So the one I was looking at was not a separate data set for refugees. They were included within all of that. It was open government. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. So you can see the open government there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so actually there's 58 records now. There's one more than when I did these screenshots. So basically, if you're here, I'm going to try to scroll slowly. You can see a variety of different data sets. So here's one, Afghan refugees. So that's a data set just for Afghan refugees. If you click on that, let's see an example here. This is the way it's all been broken down. So by province and territory, by age group, education, official language. This is how just Afghan refugees are broken down. If you keep scrolling, here's one for Syrian refugees. I suspect it's probably disaggregated in a very similar way. Asylum claimants, that was the one I showed you. There's also some, if you're interested in asylum claimants and refugees, I think there's also some good stuff in the IRB portal there. Let's see what else is there. Yeah, so resettled, here's one on specifically for resettled refugees. And it's probably similarly disaggregated. So you can see it's been disaggregated in a variety of different ways by country of citizenship and immigration category, province and gender, age, mother tongue, immigration category. So it's been disaggregated in a variety of different ways. So if you're looking just specifically for refugees, there are specific data sets for that. Yeah, GRs and PSRs at the national or provincial level. Yeah, so this is one of the challenges with the data when I'm talking about how it's not disaggregated in every possible configuration. Some of the disaggregations are not broken down for province, uh, which is something that I think a lot of us are interested in. A lot of it is, but some of it isn't disaggregated for province. So that's just kind of something you need to work with. So I mean, part of it is really working with the data you want. Um, or the data you have. It's a work with what you got scenario, but like there's also so much that you can find something of practical value in there for you. Great questions, thank you. I'll just take a minute if anybody wants to put up their hand or add another. Oh, here's a good long one, okay. If I'm looking for data relevant to the future immigration policy and planning, what would be the best source of data for based on demographic trends? What are the long-term projections for Canada's immigration intake to sustain economic growth? And what are the projected skills gaps and labor shortages in the next decade? And how can immigration policies be aligned with them? Okay, this is a great question. Because this goes into something that I think this involves going into some of those portals that I didn't go into. So let me share my screen again here. So I'm just off the, let me just read that again. Yeah. So you should be seeing my, Firefox there. Okay. So for what you're asking, I would recommend, oh, why does it look all funky? Oh no, it's responding to the snow. I think it's too snowy and the internet stopped working. Um, Holy moly, is that as hard to read? Okay, okay, let me try a different approach here. I'm just gonna share my screen again, since the internet is apparently not working very well. Okay. Oh. Sorry, not meaning to make you dizzy or anything. Okay, so remember what I said here, when you're at Statistics Canada's homepage here, we have the subjects, and we click on the subjects, and we get all of these. This, I think, is probably the place you're going to want to go. You're just not going to want to go into the immigration portal. So we've got a labor portal, population and demography portal, health, housing. I think it's worth going into those portals and exploring what's in there. I would explore it right now, but apparently the web page is not working properly. Like population and demography, there's one set in there, and if you send me an email, I can show you what it is. But it's basically there's actually two that I use. One is population projections, so that's based on a variety of different scenarios, but it includes the immigration levels. And it's basically population projections to see what's happening, what populations are expected for Canada or particular provinces. And it for each province, it projects, I think, 25 years in the future, what things are going to look like in terms of population. There's also another one that shows you can look at basically population growth and have it broken down for immigration, interprovincial migration, what are the other ones? Non-permanent residents, natural increase, so births and deaths. And it looks at that. So if you combine those, you can get a sense of the trajectory of growth in a province and then the expected trajectory of growth in a province. So something like that. And I think also, I mean, if you go into some of these others, the labor portal, for example, you can see how many, what how many jobs are out there, like what the workforce is like. So I would suggest exploring some of those portals. And when you go in there, basically just like seeing what data is there to mess around with. So, I mean, I think that would be something to go into a bit depth later on. But yeah, so I think that's one that requires you going beyond just the immigration related portals that I showed you and exploring some of the other ones. Any other questions? We have about 7 minutes left if anybody has any final thoughts. I see there's still 40 people here, so that's 40 potential questions. No, it's an infinite number of potential questions, right? All of us have infinite questions in us. Thank you. Well then, if there are no other incoming questions, I really just want to thank everybody for their time. Again, please fill out the survey. You should also get some of the slides in French or English. You'll be able to watch this later if you want. And I really just appreciate everybody showing up. I love that there's so much interest in data. I love that there's so much interest in research. It's why I'm here. It's so much fun. So there's so much we can do with this. So thank you so much for your time, and safe travels home if you need to get somewhere. And if you're not, I hope you enjoy watching the snow out of your window.